pressure.
Running looks easy, and for a trained runner, it is easy. A trained runner will have learned what the body is capable of and be aware that overstraining can cause injury.
One of the great problems that you have to realize is that every time your foot hits the ground, something like 10 stone or more has to impact on the ground, and that impact goes back through the runner. So you really got to look at the foot and all of the movement of these small bones in the foot to try and make sure that all of those articulations are free. If they're not free and mobile, then they're going to impact some of that shock further up the leg.
It's quite amazing that although we all run naturally, more or less, the ability to run effectively and efficiently is something that very often has to be learned. And many of the injuries that I see are due to people running who don't know how to run properly.
People who haven't run for a long time sometimes seem to have a rather exaggerated stamping action, and they're actually putting a lot of weight through their feet every time they put their foot down on the hard pavement. And so they may get a lot of injuries around the ankle, damage to the knees, particularly if they're overweight.
Too many people actually just jump their training dramatically, or they remember how they used to train. When I was young, I trained like this, and they go out and try and train at the same standard they used to train in.
The type of injuries that runners get depend very much on the type of running they want to do, and indeed the level to which they want to do it. People who want to sprint and run very fast tend to get muscle tears, which occur quite instantaneously. People who want to jog, run marathons, run cross-country at a relatively low rate tend to get overuse injuries, stress fractures of the shin, stress fractures of the foot, compartment syndromes and things like that.
Right, Irene, let's have a look at you now. Come and lie on the...
When they're injured, runners turn to doctors, physiotherapists and osteopaths. They can hasten recovery, but understanding what running does to the body is the key to staying free of injury.
A lot of people come to me and say, why should I have these injuries? I've run all my life, or I've played tennis all my life. Problems in the foot. Well, that's the very reason that they do get problems. We probably have a phased obsolescence of 70, and if in the course of that 70 you actually do more work than you were allowed, you will accumulate injury. And this is where I think it's essential that as an osteopath, we make sure that the athlete is ideally suited for what he's going to do. When you're trying to run, every time you put your stride in, you push forward and extend your back even further. That's the trouble. What you should have is a much straighter back where you get that line of you pushing straight through your body, not as in your case, each time you have a stride, you push in and jam that back together again. That's what the trouble is. Turn around again, let me just see.
I've been running for 20-odd years now, and fortunately I've had no major injuries. But the constant transfer of weight from leg to leg and the pounding on hard surfaces means that most distance running injuries occur in the lower leg. In the foot, in the ankle, in the Achilles tendon, the shin, the calf muscles, and of course the knee. But while physiotherapists and osteopaths can do some of the small repair work to keep the runners going, for some runners with more serious injuries, major surgery may be needed to get them back on the road.
One of the problems that runners get is a condition called compartment syndrome. Basically, what happens is that the muscles, particularly below the knee, and these are the most common areas for this problem, the muscles are bound down or covered up in membranes which surround them and hold them in place in the limb. And those membranes or envelopes can be quite hard, quite unyielding. If the muscle develops in size very rapidly as a result of training, the surrounding envelope may not expand rapidly enough to accommodate this, and so a tension develops in the muscle. Down, sister. Thank you. Right. This is made worse by exercise because increased blood flow means more fluid running through the muscle, and this produces even greater pressure inside and tension on the fibers. This can be very painful indeed and gives rise to a variety of painful conditions.
Couple more towels.
And in some cases, they can be so severe that the pressure inside the muscle is so great that it stops the blood flow. And the muscles can then die because the blood flow is cut off. This is not common, as bad as that. What we do when this happens is simply to split the envelope, rather like splitting the sleeve in a jacket that's too tight to make room for the limb inside. What we do is make a little cut in the skin, like that. We make it slightly bigger, and you can see underneath the grey, glistening membrane that is covering the muscle. That is binding it down and holding it tight. So we make a cut in that membrane now, like that. And you can see the way it opens up with the muscle, the browny red muscle bulging up underneath. We have a special instrument which goes into the cut in the sheath like that, and then simply slides up, splitting it right the way up to the knee in one direction, and then the other way, right down to the ankle the other way, like that. Then we can see the sheath of the muscle opened widely, with the muscle bulging through. The tension is off. The patient will now be comfortable. Sew up, please.
The operation improved the runner's condition, but he accepted that even first-class surgery would not restore his former level of performance.
Second, there are 3 stitches that go in here.
Seeing an operation is like looking under the bonnet of a car. We now know what was wrong and how it was put right. A car, like the human body, will need fewer repairs and will last longer if it's well looked after. So be kind to your feet and legs. Seek out softer surfaces to run on.
In fact, it's a very much better surface if you can run on grass or along canal paths or something that isn't an absolutely solid surface that's made for a motor car rather than for a foot. And I would encourage everyone who runs, if they possibly can, to mix the surface on which they run. They're much less likely to get the sort of injuries that plague people who run long distance on the road the whole time.
Now, it's very likely that all these runners have some kind of injury. It might be blisters, cramp or stitch, perhaps a slight muscle strain. But they're doing what all runners do at some time or other. They're running through the injury because the pain isn't severe enough to make them forego the fun of competition. But more serious problems, now known as overuse injuries, that is running too much without sufficient recovery time, can keep a runner off the road for weeks.
The most common injuries obviously come either from the knee joint themselves or from the ankle joint. You can get an injury from the hip, from a muscle that just flicks over here, a so-called bursitis, and then most of the other injuries either come from a growing point here, overload in children, angulation, troubles from repetition running when you strain either the inner side of the knee joint or you flick a tendon out over the outer side of the knee joint. Again, this same problem of straining the inside of the ankle can occur when the foot twists this way, or the outside, again, another muscle coming round this side. Most of the others then come from repetition strains on the bone, the so-called stress fracture. And there can be a fracture up at the hip joints, either in the hip or the pelvis itself, anywhere down the thigh bone or the femur. But the most common, the runner's stress fracture, is about 5 fingers up from the outside of the ankle. Here, the so-called shin splints about this junction here, 1/3, and the middle third, and then a funny bone in here called the navicular, especially in sprinters, the arch bones here, And occasionally these arch bones get crushed together, pinching a nerve and causing pain from shoes that are too tight. The Achilles tendon, probably the most injury prone of all in athletes, inserts in here, and it's a strain of this big calf muscle from overload that causes most problems.
Like most running problems, a strained or damaged Achilles tendon can often be relieved by rest. But pain from internal blistering or inflammation in and around the tendon can only be removed by surgery.
This leg belongs to a half-marathon runner who's been having Achilles tendon pain for some months. And there's an obvious swelling in the tendon, which we shall see in just a moment. All tendon metabolizes very slowly, that is to say, its life processes are low-geared. That is to enable it to carry the load in running. All tendons are the same. If to that you add a fairly small blood supply as well, you do produce a tissue that is quite vulnerable. And there we have the membrane showing very well, opening up. It's quite thick and scarred up this end. You can see the grey appearance of it. And underneath is a rather unhealthy-looking Achilles tendon. This occurs in all sorts of parts of the body, not only in sport, but in do-it-yourself activities and housewives doing their spring cleaning, and almost anybody given a chance. It does occur in runners. It's a result of unaccustomed activity, often change of shoe, change of terrain. The tendon itself may become inflamed or swollen or partly torn. The membrane around it can become thickened with a sort of internal blistering. And if that goes on for a long time, it can scar, become like a tight sleeve. The little areas of loose tissue called the bursae, which are under and above the tendon to allow it move in relation to the heel bone and to the skin over the heel, these may become internally blistered and inflamed, and it can be very painful and very disabling. There it is. That's the diseased, inflamed, scarred membrane from around the tendon. The patient will grow a new one in due course. When you're confronted with something like this, if a person wants to go on doing his or her activity, whether it's running or being a paratrooper or whatever, it's often necessary to do something surgical. Either remove the constricting membrane or split the tendon to relieve the tension inside it, remove diseased tissue from inside the tendon, take away the inflamed bursal sac where the tendon runs over bone. There are a number of operations that can be done, and they're usually very effective. 9 out of 10 patients get back to normal activity.
David, you've been having some...
Many running injuries respond well to the ice pack treatment. That is, applying an ice pack to the site of the pain, compressing the injury and elevating the leg. Worth trying before consulting a professional.
Yeah. I think what happens with you is you start to get... Your knees really go back an enormous amount. And what happens, that kneecap starts to flop around. And when you're starting to get into your distance on
The growth in running has brought an improvement in the range of treatments available to runners. Often the therapist has first-hand experience of running and running injuries.
What we've got to do with this... Mine was a classic example of injury myself, where because of the failure for the applied mechanics of injuries to be understood, my own problems as a runner in the past could have been treated now, but in fact were untreated when I was 18, 19, many years back when we didn't understand the problems of runners. Now, of course, with so many people being involved in marathon running, the interest in runners has become much more prominent. And it's from that interest, particularly in the States to begin with, that such things as the whole science of podiatry came about, and the particular problem of runner's knee.
And now we're looking down at your hips now, seeing if they're level, which they are, and then the next level we come to is to look at your knees. And your knees...
Podiatry, developed in the United States, is concerned with the mechanics of running. The podiatrist aims to correct gait, the way the leg and the foot behave as part of the running machine.
And as you're doing that, the thing that's very apparent to me is that the feet are rolling inwards throughout the whole of this gait cycle. In other words, instead of propelling you along straight, in line with your knees...
You can be born with poor gait or you can acquire it. Either way, it can be treated. But the question for runners with gait problems is, should they run at all?
I think the running boom, because it's a fashion, has encouraged a lot of people to take up jogging who are anatomically unsuited to it. And if they've got great bow legs or knock knees or other anatomical problems in the legs, they may very well find that jogging produces all sorts of aches and pains which aren't really manageable, and they would be much happier if they were cycling or swimming or doing some other form of regular aerobic exercise and not joining the fashion of jogging around the streets.
The thing that strikes me is that you've probably got an...
But runners aren't easily persuaded to give up. This patient wants to go on running because it gives him something that other sports don't. He's hoping podiatry will correct his inborn design fault and get him back on the road, running without pain.
To 45 degrees the other side as well. And you can see, although I'm pressing hard, it's now locked in here. Did you ever have any problems with your hips? You did?
Yes.
Anything done about it?
No.
Okay. What we're going to do is just simply internally rotate your legs and see that there's very little movement there, and then externally rotate, and you see you've got a very full range of movement there. You'd make a good ballet dancer, actually. So what we're going to do now...
Sports medicine research has shown that even a slight misalignment in the action of the foot and leg can result in pain or injury. A plaster cast will show the imperfection in the foot and will enable the podiatrist to assess what needs to be done to correct it. But always remember, don't overdo it.
It's very important to build up the distances gradually, to get really good shoes, and to be sensible about your approach to what you're doing.
I mean, some of the injuries I've pointed out, the stress fractures, I really only see in runners. It is the repetition of the same style of running all the time that produces these stress injuries. And yes, and the longer that you run, the more likely you are to break down.
This is a cast of your foot, David, that we've just taken. Right. And what we're going to produce in the laboratory is a device called an orthotic, which in fact captures the abnormality within your foot. And this goes into the shoe and prevents the excessive internal rotation of your knee and leg. Right. And this fits inside your running shoe and will put the foot into the neutral position for you running and takes the strain off your knee.
Okay.
Now, if you're new to running, don't think that you're necessarily going to end up injured or needing expensive medical treatment. You won't if you always run within your capacity, and only you know that. Set yourself a realistic program that leads to gradual improvement. You'll find it brings other benefits too.
The beneficial medical effects of running, some are controversial, but there's very little doubt that if people have a problem controlling their weight, for example, if they take regular exercise, whether it be running or any other form of aerobic exercise, such as swimming or cycling, they can control their weight much more easily and have much more freedom as to what they can eat and yet manage to maintain a sensible weight. They feel fitter and more vigorous, and this reflects itself in other activities that they do. They often sleep better. Many of them find it a useful form of psychotherapy, if you like. They can go out on a training run feeling tense and anxious and come back feeling extremely happy and relaxed.
If you're dealing with a citizen runner, as distinct from the athlete, which is, I think, what we're talking about here, you're talking about advice which will encourage good health and active life and a good quality of life and quite possibly longer life as well. And it is established that regular activity and good food, there's no doubt about it, does as a generality prolong life. There will always be exceptions to that, but as a generality that is certainly true.
Meet citizen runner Ernie Warwick from Castle Bromwich, Birmingham, a man who at the age of 71 runs to live and lives to run. Ernie's convinced that running enhances his life and has given him the fitness of someone half his age.
Well, I was made redundant at 61 years of age, and I decided to get another job if I could, and the only job I could get was a sports hall steward at Aston University. I was interested in watching these students jogging about, running and punching about in all the fancy gear. And so I decided to, being as a one-time athlete before the war, I decided to try my hand at it. And I made one or two little excursions with the students and found that I could keep up with some of them. From then on, the marathon boom was just beginning to take place. So I decided to really get fit and take part in these races. And I competed in the first People's Marathon and did the 26 mile, 385 yards in 3 hours, 53 minutes, 17 seconds. And from then on, I was smitten by the bug, and I trained all along, and since then, at the age of 70, I've run 43 marathons, and they've all been under 4 hours. And I find myself really fit, and I laugh when I look at these young lads walking along the road with big fat stomachs out here, and I think to myself, 70 years of age, I shall see them under the grave.
Ernie takes running seriously, but he's not a fanatic. He runs because he enjoys it and for the benefits he can see and feel it brings him.
I get up in the morning and do my 30 touching my toes, which are the only exercises I actually do. And then, as you know, I work up at Aston University, which is 5 miles from here, so I either walk the 5 miles or run the 5 miles there. And then when I finish what I've got to do, I either run or walk the 5 miles back. So normally I do 10 miles at least a day in actual running and walking like that. I do a bit of hill climbing training, which is a little hill which is about 200 yards away from where I live. And this hill is about 300 yards in length, and I'll run up that about 40 times and walk down it. And then I also do a little bit on the track for a bit of track training. My health is pretty good. I eat anything really, a lot of potatoes, beans, cakes, biscuits, things like that. Not too much meat. I like chicken, things like that, white meat. I eat a lot of salted biscuits, and I find that they do me very good. A lot of liquid you should drink, really, when you're an athlete, doing long distances. That's what I always find, yeah.
And there's the job. It's an important part of Ernie's life that he says also helps to keep him fit. It gives him a pattern to the week, and coming on campus keeps him in touch with young people.
When I'm walking down the road with my trolley, you can hear all these little voices, blacks, whites, yellows and all types, shouting, "Ernie, Ernie, Ernie, what we got for dinner?" Oh, I enjoy every minute of it, yes. They're all my little friends, and they all ask me there at Christmas to the Christmas parties, and so it keeps me young. Hello. I find that mixing with younger people and thinking young and acting young, I feel a lot younger than I really am.
The spoils of victory, medals and trophies from races all over Britain, from France and Japan. In 1986, Ernie ran 106 miles in 24 hours, a new world record for a man of his age. Ernie Warwick's neither a freak nor a phenomenon. He didn't set out to break records or to prove anything, nor is he attempting to defeat the onset of old age. So what makes Ernie run?
We all have our problems in life. I find that when I go out running, my mental attitude to life is a lot clearer. You can solve your problems by running out in the country, and it seems to soothe the mind, and you see many things that normally you wouldn't see. And you come back refreshed mentally and physically. And I get a great deal of satisfaction out of actually running and competing against younger people, knowing that my old bones are still as good as these people with the young bones. As I always say to the lads at Aston University, I'll nick up there, he's got a long while to go to catch me, which he has at the moment. And I keep going on. And that's how I enjoy life.
The marathon is the most demanding event open to the ordinary runner. In the biggest marathons, there are hundreds, often thousands of winners, because anyone who completes the marathon distance of 26 miles, 385 yards is a winner.
The marathon is the ultimate challenge in the Olympic calendar. And when you're in your office or in a pub or at home or something and you say you're going to try it, people say, oh no, you're not. You know, you couldn't do it. And that is a challenge which you can't just go and do tomorrow. You've got to actually sit down and work it out and do some training for 4, 5, 6 months. And it does, I think, really get back to that huge sense of accomplishment, that you've done something that people didn't think you were capable of.
In the autumn, we looked for volunteers to run in the Wolverhampton Marathon in the following spring, on Sunday the 5th of April. 2 runners from Suffolk, Pip and Julie Norris of Bungay, agreed to take up the challenge. So did Norwich runner Terry Eagling, an accountant with a truck manufacturer. Terry had completed 2 marathons, but he was keen to improve his time. But for Pip and Judy, Wolverhampton was to be their first marathon, if they survived the hard slog of a winter's training. So with 26 miles of Wolverhampton streets to cover in about 6 months' time, our 3 volunteer runners buckled down to the unyielding demands of the marathon. Although Judy and Pip are experienced club runners with a number of shorter races behind them, the arrival of Christmas was a reminder that April the 5th was not that far off. Encouraged and helped by fellow members of their club, the Bungay Black Dog Running Club, Judy and Pip mostly relied on their long-held ambition to keep them going.
I've always wanted to do a marathon, but have never been particularly happy with the thought of committing myself to the time for the mileage. But I'm pleased with the idea of finally getting to grips with it.
I've always wanted to run a marathon, but I've never had the courage either.
A marathon, that is the magical distance. You get a tremendous sense of satisfaction. I think a lot of people can run 10 miles. A few more can run 13. There isn't as many can run 26, and you get this feeling of achievement.
It's got to be a major barrier that I see ahead of me. Possibly not the 26, it's getting past the 20. Everyone always says the first 20 is the first half. It's that point. If I go past 20, I know I'll make the 26.
I hope to achieve a time of around about the 3.5 hours. I need the times. I need to know the distances that I've run and the times that I've run them in, and to see some improvement, if you like. I won't get much satisfaction out of completing the race in 4.5 hours. I think I could probably do that now, but I will want to train and do sufficient training to get near my time of 3:30.
My time will be under 4 hours, and I would dearly love to see something nearer 3:30. But that's going to be quite a target for me. I'm a wonderful plodder. 3:30 will be hard.
Well, I think we're probably going to set out to run together. So providing, well, I think anything under 4 hours I'd be well pleased with.
You
Well,
could
cool.
do much better than that.
Well, I don't know. It's having never run one before. I think it's a long way and it's unknown territory.
Okay, now as soon as you're around that bag, hit it. Get the momentum early on.
Training for any long-distance event should be varied. Always running at the same pace will get you through, but try tackling hills or short bursts of faster running. Whatever you do, don't go too fast too soon.
It doesn't matter what level you're at. I think you need to progress very gently towards high level of training. And most people start thinking, well, marathon is 26 miles, then I must increase my mileage drastically to get fit enough to cover that distance. If you try and do that too quickly, then you'll break down and you'll end up not running at all. So you need to progress very slowly and very gradually,
I find that I can run 80 miles a week very comfortably without feeling too tired or without suffering from injuries. Other people wouldn't be able to, and I think it's no good someone saying because she does 80 miles a week, I've got to do 80 miles a week. You've got to find your own optimum level.
Then the most important point is not to waste all that hard training by training too hard, too close to the event. Actually take a very drastic taper off towards the event so that you're rested when you start the race and not shattered from the training load beforehand.
Really just to take it steadily and not to expect too much too soon.
When you're preparing for a marathon, weather like this will slow you down, but it needn't keep you indoors. After Christmas, Pip and Judy kept up their level of training in conditions that would have tried the resolve of any runner. At this stage, they were doing about 40 to 45 miles a week. They were up to schedule, but spring didn't seem that far away.
April the 5th looks considerably more daunting than it did before Christmas. We'd had a very good run up to Christmas. We've had a very, very successful time. We were both doing a lot of training and both going well. Judy winning races, as always.
And you're running faster than you've ever run before.
Yeah, I was constantly doing personal bests virtually every time I went out, so it was going very, very well. The snow's made life quite difficult at times. We had 2 or 3 days when, of course, it was impossible to do anything, and now we have to be very careful when we go out. We try our utmost to run hard. We did a long run on Sunday and thought we'd run pretty hard, and when we looked at our time over it, we were really very disappointed. We'd done about just over 8-minute miling, and we usually do our long runs at about 7.5. So we were definitely 1 pace back for every 2 forward while we did that.
I don't find it very easy to motivate myself in this weather, I must admit. I find it very difficult to get out and do something. But once you're out there, it's not too bad. But it's certainly not going to be fast. All this on our training chart that we're supposed to be doing some fast work, which you just can't in this weather. It's impossible to do anything other than just time on your feet. But providing we don't go down with anything between now and the next few weeks, we should get some good training in. We want to try and build up now to, our longest run so far has been 14 miles, which we've really got to start building that up to getting in a couple of 20s sometime.
No problems. We hope for great things.
For Terry, in Norwich, training continued through the snows of January. By now, he was running about 50 miles a week, sometimes with his club, the Duke Street Runners of Norwich. Terry subjected his training to continuous assessment and analysis, always asking himself how well his training was going.
It's been going well. I gradually built up over Christmas. I had a fortnight's holiday and stepped up the mileage to about 50 a week. I'd done that for 3 weeks, and then just as the snow came, I suffered an injury, and unfortunately I missed the last 8 days training. I went to the physio a couple of times, and he has now assured me that that's okay to start stepping up the mileage again, and from now on I will be building back gradually. I've got a 20-mile race booked at Bury on the 22nd of February, and that will be the real test as to whether I'm up to the mileage.
Determined to keep to his training plan, whatever the weather, Terry was critical of even the slightest deviation from it.
I'm a bit behind the schedule that I've set myself at this point in time. All the people say listen to your body, and as I've got older, I think it's been easier to do, listen to my body. So I don't go out when I've got injuries now, whereas I would have done a few years ago.
I think my experience nowadays is that more people have gone in for running things like the marathons. And I mean, I'm delighted. I think there aren't enough challenges in this world. And the whole point about the marathon is that you might not finish, which is why people do it. So there are bound to be problems and failures coming from that. But I think that too many people start off trying to run the marathon without giving themselves long enough in terms of preparation. They hope to switch from doing nothing to running a marathon in 3 months. It's just not on.
One of the world's greatest marathon runners sets out for work. He's the fastest ever winner of the London Marathon. He's won the Chicago Marathon twice, once in a world record time of 2 hours, 8 minutes and 5 seconds. At the Royal Air Force Repair Base in St Athan in South Wales, he's known as Airframe Technician B8110633 Jones S. To the world of athletics, he's Steve Jones, Britain's top marathon runner.
My training is all planned, I plan it myself. I sit down for a few days and try and plan it for, let's say, next 6 or 7 weeks. I organise my sort of steady running, which is where I get my miles from, and my interval training, hand in hand sort of thing. My average mileage for a week is just anywhere between 90 and 110 miles a week, except for maybe this time of year where it's very muddy and very cold and windy, but it's enjoyable running and it's relaxing running as well. Max amount of miles would be about 22, I think. That would be only on a Sunday where I do maybe an 18 or 20 in the morning and might have a jog in the afternoon just to record a few miles. On a weekday, the most I do is 20, which is split in 2 runs, with my lunchtime run and my evening run.
It's a highly disciplined life marked by a single-minded determination to excel. Although Steve Jones is competing at the highest level, his approach to preparing for a marathon can be followed by all runners. He puts his success down to a few key factors.
I think it's the training I've done, not just the training I've done. As the type of person I am, I suppose, pretty resilient sort of person. Once I start something, I try and finish it through. And I'm a very determined person as well.
That determination and months of hard training brought him the world record in Chicago in 1984.
It was incredible, it was great. I could see the clock, I was going down Home Street and the clock was ticking away quicker than I could pump my arms. I realised then I was on a chance for a record, and I could see the clock, just ticking away.
He returned to Wales a hero. But Steve's programmed himself to train and to compete, and he was soon on his feet again, clocking up the miles. To runners who ask him for advice, Steve's as uncompromising as he is with himself.
I find it very hard to give advice to people. When I was coached and the advice I get, I take 100%. I never question anything I've been told to do in the past regarding my training. And I've given 100%, and my coach gave 100%, I was 20%, and I could never coach anybody not knowing or thinking that they're not giving me 100%.
Advised by squadron leader Alan Warner, Steve plans a season's races. The races are varied, like the training. Running up a heartbreak hill like this 10 times in succession gives Steve the reserve of strength that he relies on to win races and break records.
We've got a 20-mile race on.
Back in Suffolk, Judy and Pip have been training hard, perhaps too hard. If they have a problem, it's mental rather than physical.
Well, again, if you'd spoken to me this time last week, we were both ready to say, stuff it, that's it. Never want to run a marathon. Now we know why we didn't before. The sheer gutty grind of getting out and doing miles for the sake of miles. And I had a lot of problem with the heel, but I've had some injections into that, which have solved the pain anyway.
You find it very boring, though, doing the long runs?
Well, pretty well. Not very enjoyable. I did 20 for the first time in my life. And in about 2:33, which is much better than I ever expected.
That's very good. Once you've done 20 miles, you really feel the marathon within touching distance, don't you?
It is.
Another 6 miles.
It is.
Around there. The danger in the race is that lots of people start off too fast, and you
Yes.
get drawn along at their pace rather than your own pace.
It really is a bad thing to do, then, is it? Go off too fast.
Yeah, it really is, because by now, in any marathon runner's training, the pattern is set. It's too late to increase the mileage or to make radical changes to the training schedule. But it's never too late to prepare mentally for what is a considerable test of body and spirit. A major marathon, like the Wolverhampton Marathon, there'll be lots of people and they'll be getting excited and you just can't help yourself.
Yeah.
You must hold back in those early miles.
Yeah.
I think the physical aspects, in a sense, are almost the least important part. What is important is the quality of the mind, the tenacity of spirit, the strength of resilience. All of the qualities that make people fabulous people are the kind of qualities that if they're brought to bear in one person and they decide to direct those energies towards achieving success in the marathon, they will succeed. And at the end of the day, it's about the inner qualities. The running can be developed simply by practicing running.
Well, Terry, there's 8 weeks to go now. How are you feeling?
Quite good. That's difficult now because I've started building up the mileage and I look forward to a day off.
Well, that's very important, actually, because you do need to recover in between. You need to be doing the long runs, of course, but you need to recover, otherwise you'll be shuffling along. Are you sleeping all right as well?
Sleeping well, yes.
Oh, that's good.
Trying to get to bed about 9.
Ah.
So I get up fairly early in the morning and I do a bit on the exercise bike and the food loosening exercises because I am stiff in the morning sometimes.
Right. You really have to consider 8 weeks is nearer to 6 weeks of preparation, of course, because the last 2 weeks you're going to be really easing down, aren't you?
Yes, yes.
You're taking it very, very easy the last couple of weeks.
That's right. I've got a half marathon booked 2 weeks before, so I hope that will just about be the right distance.
Right, and that will end the main training, won't it?
Yes.
After that half marathon, like a plane coming into land, you'll be easing down towards the ground and the marathon itself.
Yes, they got us down Wednesday, 8 miles.
A typical scene in the Norris household as Pip and Judy fine-tune their next training session. Apart from making sure they're spending enough time on their feet, Pip and Judy have followed a sensible diet with plenty of carbohydrate in their meals. They've increased their liquid intake and they've been getting enough sleep. They're tired after training, but not to the point of exhaustion.
Better get some sleep.
Right.
They look in good shape for Wolverhampton, now only weeks away, because they've disciplined themselves to follow a sound, well-paced training programme. The major components for training for any event, and although we've talked about the marathon, don't forget there's 10 kilometres, there's half marathons, all stepping stones towards a long distance race. The major components include graduated and regular training and recovery. A lot of people overlook the recovery phase, which is very, very important. You have to allow yourself plenty of time to prepare for a long distance race, but all the time it's graduated, it's regular, and you recover in between. And eventually you're ready for the day when you will stand on the starting line of your race. Sunday the 5th of April, and over 6,000 runners gather in a rainy Wolverhampton to run in the first major marathon of the season. The elite runners will battle it out for a better time, a higher placing, but this is a people's marathon for the citizen runner, and amongst them are Pip, Judy and Terry, who are out to prove that they're a match for the marathon.
Thank heavens, all that training all over the winter, and at long last we've made a start.
It was great to be finally off, but my main concern was not to run too fast in the early stages.
We were just approaching the mile mark, and my main interest at that stage was that I was running at the pace I'd set myself.
This was at 7 miles, and I was still running within myself and having a wonderful time, thoroughly enjoying the crowds and the atmosphere.
By now I was feeling considerably less cocky than I had earlier on. I was feeling the pace just a little bit. I felt we'd probably gone off too fast.
At about 9 miles I was feeling good, and I was particularly pleased because I'd dropped a half a minute earlier on and I'd now made that up. I'd made a point of taking a drink at every feeding station, and water never tasted so good.
We were coming up to the halfway mark at this stage, and really I was starting to feel in pain. Judy had started to pull away, and I knew I was going to be in trouble. Distinctly worried at the thought of all that training, and would it be successful?
Just over the halfway mark, and still enjoying myself and feeling strong, but I was worried about Pip.
Well into the second half of the race at this point, and I was really struggling. I didn't really expect it to be this hard.
How you doing? How's it going so far?
We're going to stop for about
6 miles?
16
16.
I started to cramp up in the car, but doesn't seem to gone off now.
Is it okay now?
Yeah.
There's no problems at all?
No, no.
No blisters?
No, no.
No cramps?
Well, Vaseline.
Well, Vaseline? Yeah. Okay, if you get any other problems, you can slide the rest of the way.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll see you at the end. All the best, Terry.
Running the distance at her planned speed, 7.5 minutes a mile, Judy was having an enjoyable, trouble-free race. Further back in the field, Pip wasn't faring so well. After 18 miles, he realised he'd made a tactical error in starting out too fast. When this happens, it's tempting to give up. Pip was determined to press on, but he still had another gruelling 8 miles to go.
I think a lot of people can run 10 miles. A few more can run 13. There isn't as many can run 26, and you get this feeling of achievement.
I've always wanted to run a marathon. I've never had the courage either. I'm not too sure how easy it's going to be.
It's got to be a major barrier that I see ahead of me. Possibly not the 26, it's getting past the 20. Everyone always says the first 20 is the first half. It's that point. If I go past 20, I know I'll make the 26.
The first of our trio to finish, Terry Eagling in 3 hours, 12 minutes.
I found the last 2 miles were much harder, but I was keeping to my plan. When I saw the clock, I knew that the time would be the best yet. But what pleased me most was that I had run every step of the way.
Encouraged by the crowds, Judy finished strongly to find she'd done far better than expected.
The finish at last, I couldn't believe it. Here I was actually going to finish my very first marathon, and then to see the clock, 3:21, unbelievable, so much faster than I thought possible. And then to find out I was 7th woman overall, absolutely fantastic.
Judy, you did it.
I did.
How do you feel?
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Oh, I'm so thrilled, and I was faster than I ever thought I could be. And
What was the worst part of it?
Round about 22, I wasn't really hurting, I just didn't want to run anymore. I was just fed up with the whole business. There didn't seem anybody around me or anything.
Was there any point that you think you weren't going to finish?
No.
Terry, great, you did it. How do you feel now?
Relieved. That was hard.
You don't seem as excited as Judy. Is it inward excitement, or is it because you've been here before and it's not quite the same the second time?
No, I think I set a plan. I was just about to plan, and great, yes.
Well, what was it like coming across the line, the finish line? Can you remember the moment?
Fantastic. The crowds were cheering and $1 million.
When can you do another one?
In about 20 years.
And now what are you going to do to celebrate?
Big bath, I think.
Have the bottle of wine we didn't have last night.
The bottle of wine you didn't have last
Yeah.
night, right. And we've got to wait for Pip as well. We don't know what the news of Pip at the moment. He was walking when we last saw him.
Meanwhile, Pip was still out on the streets of Wolverhampton, striving to reach his predicted time.
26 miles gone. They have to make the last 385 yards all uphill towards the finish. But the crowds were fantastic and helped me along enormously. Not quite the finish I might have hoped for when I started training 6 months ago, but I'm going to get under 4 hours, and that's marvellous.
To run a marathon at all is remarkable enough. To run the marathon distance demands a huge investment of time, energy, determination and sheer staying power. Two British runners, Leslie Watson and Ron Hill, have each run over 100 marathons. They've covered the 26 miles, 385 yards, often as winners, always highly placed.
Through the night, through the dawn, behind you another runner is born. Don't look back.
I had a goal in life, and that was to be as near to being the best runner in the world as it was possible, and I pursued those ends using, you know, the methods that I had to use. I think I got fairly close, you know.
Ron's ambition to excel as a runner was fired by reading of someone whose background and interests seemed to match his own.
It was a character in a boys' comic or stroke magazine called Alf Tupper, who was a guy who lived in a northern town. You never read anything about his parents. He lived rough a lot of the time under railway arches and disused canal barges and everything, and he was a runner, and he obviously had a very tough life and got no help off anybody, and yet when it came to races, Alf usually won these races, you know, and that sort of kind of struck a chord with me, because I was from a northern town, Accrington. We lived in a 2 up and 2 down, and for a while Alf Tupper worked on the railway and my dad worked on the railway, and we sort of lived very close to the sort of railway lines, and I just sort of identified with this guy, and I was so small as a kid that I was never any good at football or cricket, and it seemed logical to try to be a runner and emulate Alf Tupper. So after a couple of years of thinking about this, I joined a local athletic club, Clayton Moors Harriers, and that's how it started.
I was never any good at running, but I was always very interested in organised races in the playground when I was young. I used to see runners run past the window and wish I could do it as well. And I had an uncle who was Scottish 100 yards record holder at one stage, and I think maybe hearing a little bit about him fired my imagination in some way.
Perhaps the most remarkable thing about both Ron and Leslie is that they began young and they're still running. Although Leslie ran for Scotland in the mile and at cross country at the age of 16, she didn't then see herself becoming the champion she is today.
I started training when I was 10, and it was really a friend of mine she lived next door, and she was Glasgow Schools, I think 80 yards champion at the time for the primary schools. And when she came to live next door, I heard all about competitive athletics, but I was so much slower than she was that I didn't think I'd be allowed to join the Harriers, and she didn't either. And then one day she said some girl had joined who was maybe as slow as I was, or almost as slow, and so she asked if I could come along, and they said anyone could come. And she took me along, and I've been going ever since, really, and training ever since.
Let's keep the arms up. Let's keep the form good all the way now. Think about what you're doing.
An early and continuing influence on Leslie, her first mentor, John Anderson, former Scottish national coach.
That's good. Well, I think when she began, I mean, I could spend a lot of time, and I'm sure she'll forgive me if I say that when I first met Leslie, her quality that brought her to attention was the fact that when we had races and runs, she was always at the back of the field. I mean, she started right at the back, and we used to have a sort of standing joke. It was a little over-exaggerated, but the other girls saying, is Leslie here today? Oh, yes, she is. Oh, that's good. I won't be last because Leslie's here, because Leslie enjoyed the running. She wasn't caught up in the racing. But what was interesting was that when there was something that really mattered, like the Scottish Championships or the cross country, you suddenly saw a different Leslie emerge, and the competitive edge came out then, so that as well as being a runner, she could win when she wanted to, or she could place very high. She could drive herself and lift herself far beyond the normal levels.
By contrast, Ron was striving to turn his boyhood fantasy into reality without any coaching.
Well, there wasn't any training in those days. One ran at school during the games period because we had quite a liberal sports master who would allow you not to play football but to go running. And the Harriers ran once a week on Saturdays from local working men's clubs, so virtually I ran twice a week, and I didn't think anybody else did any more, and very few people did more than that. And in fact, it was I probably wanted to run further, because I remember one occasion we were actually sent back. The boys were told to turn around and go back to the working men's club. They couldn't run any further. It wasn't good for them, so it wasn't difficult for me.
When I was 13, I was a member of Maryhill Harriers, and John, being a very determined person, told me if I did as he said, I would make the Scottish team, which was unbelievable then, because I was always lost. And so he started training us, and it was very, very hard training.
Get them up higher, that's good, it's better. That's it, and enough.
So much so that there was a complaint to the Scottish Women's 3As about John Anderson, and none of his athletes were allowed to compete without a doctor's letter. And when we produced these letters, we were allowed to compete.
Remember the form, let's get it all nicely together. We want good posture, good rhythm, good control. Right, let's go then, come on. That's good, that's good.
I made the Scottish team eventually. I think I was about 16 when I made the Scottish team for the first time. But we were training far harder than everybody else in these days. I think he makes me realise, if you really work, that you can't imagine just how much you can improve.
Come on, you're not tired yet. I'll tell you when to feel tired.
And in Lancashire, with the example of Alf Tupper to inspire him, Ron soon began to show his ability.
I began to win the schools races, then I went to university and quickly got into the first team, and in the first year actually won the university championships, but at county level I couldn't make the Lancashire team.
Years after her early promise was recognised, Leslie still relies on the advice of her first coach.
Leslie is magic. I mean, that has to be said. There are very few people who've brought more to the sport than they've actually taken out. And Leslie is one of these rare and remarkable beings that actually enthuses other people. I mean, the vitality and the sense of excitement that comes out of Leslie when she talks about running, the interest in, and the genuine wish to share the pleasure and the experiences that she's had with other people have set people afire, and she has this capacity to share with other people her love for running, because her life is running, isn't it?
I think he's the only person who can make a good athlete out of nothing. All the other coaches look for the people with the talent and coach them. John looks for the people who are interested, and that was my lucky break.
After several years of trying, I finally made the Lancashire team, and then I realised why I hadn't made the Lancashire team, because they were so strong that, most of the England team was the Lancashire team. So I made the England team as well in that year of '62, and that represented probably the biggest step, becoming an international.
The individual title went to a contestant who arrived so late he had to run over 2 miles from the station, and then he couldn't find his running shoes. Coming in barefoot but triumphant, Lancashire's Ron Hill. Runner-up last year and the year before, this is Ron Hill's first inter-counties title.
Leslie's been established amongst marathon runners since the early 70s. Most of her 100-plus marathons have been completed in under 3 hours. To maintain this standard, she puts in at least 40 to 50 miles every week and punishing sessions in the gym. Leslie exercises not only to keep herself in peak condition, but also because less weight means more speed.
They say in marathon, if you're 1% overweight, it'll slow you down 1% in the marathon. And I'm actually between 18 and 20% overweight. So one of the best things I could do would be to lose weight, although that's easier said than done. But that's down to quantity of food partly, although it's the junk food I think that's the most fattening thing. I've taken more vitamins as the years have gone on, and I've found this has helped me tremendously. And for me, I find that quite a good combination. Makes me feel a bit more energetic, because I'm always trying to do slightly more than there are hours in the day, so I'm usually very short on sleep. I like 8 hours sleep, but most of the time I probably have about 6 hours sleep.
Kevin. Hi, Ron. Subscription from Lou Myers.
When he's not running or competing, Ron stays close to runners and running.
New York Marathon there. We need to get some more details. If you can see Jeff Smith dropped out halfway, if you can somehow get hold of Jeff.
Publisher of a monthly magazine for runners, Ron, who's a qualified textile chemist, also owns a sports shoe and clothing company. Whatever he's doing, wherever he is, time has to be found for running.
Too early or something.
I don't find running and fitting running into my life difficult at all. I mean, a lot of people will say, well, look, running is your life. How do you fit the other things in? But I'm, in a way, a creature of habit. And I think if you want to carry out a regular running program, you have to make it something of a habit. And therefore, I always run every morning, first thing in the morning before breakfast. I run with May mainly now. And I find that if I don't run at lunchtime, inevitably the phone does ring, or somebody wants to meet me, or something's happening, I'm in a meeting towards the end of the day, then I'm under pressure to get the run in. In winter it's dark and I don't like, particularly running in the dark. So I prefer, and always, in fact, almost always run at lunchtime. So that is a routine. And to be honest, I don't find that difficult at all.
Top marathon runners like Ron and Leslie travel the world to run 26 miles. Some are bread and butter races, others stay in the memory.
I think New York, it's so exciting. Even I have difficulty in slowing myself down in the start, and normally my problem is going off too slowly and then having a lot of catching up to do in the second half of the race.
And there they go. Starting on both sides of the bridge, there's a slight stagger to account for the fact that the two sides are slightly different in length, and this sight needs no words.
But New York's so exciting that it just puts a spring in your step, and the crowds are amazing. It's deafening, they shout so loudly, and it's so exciting. You feel like turning around and running back again at the end. I think it's the only marathon that really I've run all the way home for about 2 or 3 miles after to the place I was staying after the race, and I was really running as fast as I could because I was so excited at the thought of the race. And the next day you do feel really, really on a high.
There was a big step up to international, and then a lot of heartbreak and disappointments at that level until I sort of finally achieved what I thought was something.
And Ron Hill making the pace on him.
I'd been an international for 7 years then and been to a lot of games, including 2 Olympics, and never won a damn thing, and it looked like that was going to be the story of my career. I can get there but never perform on the big day. And in fact, on that occasion, it was on the original course from Marathon to Athens, so there was a lot of history attached to that race. And the race finished in the old 1896 Marble Stadium. It was a special finish for that particular race. And over the last 6 miles, although I was desperately tired, this guy was slowing up, and I caught him with 1 kilometre to go.
Hill's coming right up on his shoulder. Hill coming up to overtake him now. What a tremendous performance by Hill. Hill going sweeping past him, and watch Hill accelerate now. Hill will put in a burst to kill off Rowland.
I was very happy to be winning a silver medal, and suddenly for it to turn into gold was unbelievable. And I raced into that stadium, and I looked over my shoulder twice on the track. Even though I was miles ahead, I kept thinking he must be catching me.
And the new European champion is Ron Hill for Great Britain.
And my mother and father were there, and May and the 2 kids were there, so it was a tremendous occasion. And I've never lived through anything like that again, I'm sure. It was really marvellous.
Gold, silver and bronze, the tangible accolades for the triumphs of a lifetime's running. The Olympic Games, the European Championships, the Commonwealth Games, the Boston Marathon in 1970, when Ron Hill was the fastest marathon runner in the world. Ron and Leslie are star performers, and race organisers all over the world pay high fees to get them to run, and more if they win. Leslie Watson stayed a champion not only through her ability and commitment to winning, but also because she takes care to stay free of injury. And as a physiotherapist, she helps others to avoid or treat the aches and strains of running.
Are you running tonight?
Yes, I am.
Probably third of my patients are sports injuries, but I do a lot of chronic injuries like recurrent stiff neck or shoulders or bad back, and I do enjoy doing these things as well. It's really important if you could get out and run a bit more on soft surfaces. And part of the thing I enjoy doing is telling people how to prevent their injuries, because it's very foot related in running it. There's so many people have injuries due to just the wrong shoes, and this is quite rewarding because you recommend the right shoe and sometimes the pain clears up immediately just with a tiny bit of treatment.
I can feel that.
Bit of fibrositis there. I'll show you some more exercises after that should help that a bit. And you can advise people in their training, and it means I have a very wide range of patients. I have people from all walks of life, and I have young people, old people, complete variety, and it makes my job very exciting as well. I really, in effect, have two jobs, one as a runner and one as a physiotherapist.
You're going to be running what they call off the road as well as on the road, canal banks and parks and everything. You're going to need a bit of grip on the bottom, otherwise you could slip and do yourself a nasty injury. And the thing with this is that you've got this...
Free advice from one of the greats of British athletics. Though yesterday's champions may be strangers to the young, Ron Hill's keen to encourage and promote running events for young people.
A lot of other shoes.
If we can get them off the streets, away from committing criminal damage, and channel their energies into a constructive area, then this is going to help us in the long run in policing it.
If you consider the Bolton Marathon, this year there are about 3,000 runners in the marathon, but the Plodder Lane Dash, which was run in conjunction for it for kids, had got about 2,200 runners, and I can see that in a couple of years overtaking the marathon itself. So the meeting this morning with the police who want to put on a schools Olympics in the Greater Manchester area was purely a consultancy thing. You know, they wanted to pick my brains, and they also want to see if I'll be involved in the publicity side of promoting the thing and putting my name to it and being at the launch or whatever, which, you know, I'll be quite happy to do for them.
Really get involved.
I think you'd rather see them out running and training than sort of doing the other naughty things that kids can get up to.
Creative rather than destructive.
Yeah.
Get them
Trying to run away from us.
You should try to catch him there.
Yeah.
I like to go horse riding, but I very rarely do it. I'm so short of time. Sometimes I go in Hyde Park, but they're very few and far between, so I'm really like a complete beginner, not being very good at sport. I find each time I go, it's like the first time, because I do leave such long gaps in between. Occasionally I have gone up for a few times in succession, and then I've seen a bit of improvement, but then if you leave it for another 6 months or a year, then you're back to square one again.
But this is where they both belong, out on the roads, still striving to get the best out of themselves. Both Ron and Leslie agree that performance is closely related to diet.
Diet is important to everybody, not just runners. You know, I think exercise it should be a very integral part of anybody's life if they want to lead a healthy life and a fit life and live longer, basically. But even 15, 20 years ago, I was eating quite a few raw foods, eating only brown bread, basically. And my diet now is not changed that much. In the morning, I have sort of muesli, and I have that with a banana. I do put a bit of brown sugar on because I like sweet things, and then I have coffee with sugar again, and that's more or less my breakfast. I don't eat a lot. For lunch I will have 2 slices of brown bread with some cold meat and always a tomato. I have a tomato, then I have some of maize fruit cake, which again is essential carbohydrates. Then I always finish my lunch with an apple, and then basically I don't eat anything else till the evening, when I will have probably pasta once a week, maybe rice once a week. On the other days I will eat a potato as the carbohydrate input, a small amount of meat, either red or white, and probably some fish, and always some fresh vegetables. And that's about it. I don't really eat anything more. I don't always have a sweet or anything like that. So it's not a large input, but you know, I feel I'm very healthy and my weight doesn't change, so I think I'm eating enough.
I prefer vegetarian. I like vegetarian whole food best, but I eat out a lot, so sometimes if it's not a vegetarian restaurant, it's difficult to find something that's vegetarian that tastes good. And so then I do have fish and I break down and have puddings usually, and I keep eating chocolate in between. And this is a very bad thing that I always try and cut out. I maybe cut it out for a day or two, and then I go back onto it. I take vitamins all the time, and hopefully this counteracts to a degree the wrong things that I eat. I probably eat too much, eat about 6,000 calories a day, which is really too much, and so I have a bit of a weight problem usually. And this slows me down quite a bit in my running, but I do love eating so much.
Since 1956 I've kept a training log, and it's 2 lines per run, and it developed very quickly into 2 runs per day. And I got a big notebook now, and I keep 10 lines for competitions, which I fill in red. So every mile that I've run since 1956 has been recorded. Tuesday, August the 10th, 1971, lunchtime, Helsinki. The marathon course, dropped off at 16 kilometres and run back to the Sunday, 16th of July, 1972, morning. 20.5-mile course, opposite way around. Knackered at the end, sweated a lot, took my best off. Thursday, January 3rd, 1980, morning. 4-mile road course. Dangerous running, raining, sheet ice and slippery frozen smooth snow.
There are very few people who start out being naturals in that sense, who are automatically great. They have to work very hard at it, and you have to be very prepared to dig in and to dig in and to dig in and to keep going and to keep going and to persevere. So you look for people with a sense of commitment, with a sense of tenacity, with an ambition to do well, to do better than they ever even dreamed was possible. In other words, to chase the impossible dream, to be able to be consistent. So they have to train every day. What they're really doing is signing a contract for life, because once you're into running, you're into running. Once you're into marathon, then you've, as it were, sold yourself to the marathon. It becomes the centerpiece in your life. Everything is then directed around your ambition to run and to run and to run and to run faster over an enormous distance.
Running daily, as I have done for the last 30 years almost, has kept my body in the condition that it should be in, and I'm very happy to remain that way. I couldn't sort of anticipate turning into a fatty, which I would almost certainly do if I stopped running, and therefore I intend to keep on forever.
Forever?
Well, another 60 years anyway, at least.
Leslie Watson coming in, I believe.
I think really at the moment there's a lot of scope in long distance running for women because they haven't been doing it so long, and that's the highlight for me. I'm not so keen on training, but I do love racing.
To Ron and Leslie, running is a way of life. They still run to win, but most of all, they run because they enjoy it.